Some stories begin with fireworks. Mine began with silence. The kind of silence that follows you into every room, fills your coffee cup in the morning, and wraps itself around your throat when you try to speak. For a long time, I lived inside that silence. A quiet marriage, a quiet house, a quiet woman. Until one ordinary evening, everything changed. And I didn't even have to look for the truth. It came to me in the form of a dinner reservation. It was a Wednesday. Rain had just started to fall soft against the windows. My husband's voice echoed from the shower, humming a song I didn't recognize. I stood at our nightstand folding his shirt when his phone lit up. A message from someone I didn't know, but the words, they knew me. Table for two confirmed. Callista 7:30, window seat. She'll love it. That one line unraveled 17 years of trust faster than betrayal usually does. Not with lipstick on a collar, not with perfume on a shirt, but with a sentence. Polished, simple, final. I didn't check his messages. I didn't need to, because I already knew. He wasn't planning that night for me. He hadn't made reservations to surprise his wife. He was bringing someone else and giving her the night I once dreamed of. There was a time I would have broken, would have screamed, thrown something. But that version of me no longer existed. No, this version smiled and made a reservation of her own. Not at a different place, not on a different night, at the same restaurant, at the same time, at the table right beside theirs. But I wouldn't go alone. I didn't know his name yet. The man whose life had been quietly rewritten by the same deceit. But I knew he existed, and I knew he deserved the truth as much as I did. So I sat at the kitchen table, untouched coffee in front of me, and began to search. Her name wasn't hard to find. Her laugh had echoed through one too many photos. I remembered her lips red like wine, the kind that stain more than glasses. She worked at his firm. Young, polished, the kind of pretty that walks into a room expecting gravity to bend. I found her social media within minutes. It was all their curated smiles, brunches, inspirational captions, and a husband. His name was Nathan, architect, designer, devoted by the look in his eyes in every photo where he stood beside her. The kind of man who bought flowers on Wednesdays and held her umbrella in the rain. I wondered if he knew his loyalty was being traded for candlelight and lies. He didn't deserve to be blindsided. Not by the person he trusted, not in public, so I gave him a choice. I opened my laptop, took a breath, and began typing, not as a wife, not as a woman betrayed, but as someone offering clarity in a world that thrives on illusion. Dear Mr. Nathan Rivers, my name is Claire Whitmore. I'm a lecturer at Westbridge University, currently hosting a series on sustainable architecture and design. Your work on the Lambert District caught our eye, and I would be honored to discuss a potential guest seminar with you over dinner. I've made a reservation this Friday at Callista 7:30 p.m. window seat. I hope you'll consider it. Warm regards, Claire. Send. There, simple, respectful, but with just enough truth hiding in the shadows. 2 hours later, he replied, grateful, polite. Yes, I'd love to. I stared at the screen. He didn't know, but he would. Not through confrontation, through positioning. I picked up the phone and called the restaurant directly. Hi, I'm confirming a reservation for Friday night 7:30 p.m. table for two. Window seat, please. If possible, right beside a reservation under the name Langston. A pause. Of course, ma'am. You'll be seated near them. Any wine preference? No, I smiled. Just a good view. Click! And it was done. No screaming match, no public humiliation. Just four people, two tables, and the truth seated between them. That Friday, I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. Not to impress anyone, but because I needed to see myself the woman I had neglected in the mirror for years. Teal silk. He once said it was too bold. Good. Tonight, bold was the point. I wore heels I had never dared unwrap, painted my lips with the color of unspoken words, and walked out the door not like a wife abandoned, but like a woman who had finally remembered her power. When I arrived, Nathan was already there. Dark coat, nervous smile. He stood when he saw me, eyes soft, unaware of the storm he was walking into. Claire, he asked. Yes, I replied, shaking his hand gently. Thank you for coming. He smiled warm. No, thank you. It's an honor. We sat, talked, shared small pleasantries over the clink of wine glasses and flicker of candlelight. But I was listening for footsteps, and then I heard them. They didn't walk in, they glided. Like the stars of a scene they thought they had choreographed. He wore the blazer I bought him last fall, the one I'd found on sale and wrapped in gold tissue because we couldn't afford luxuries anymore. Apparently, he saved it for occasions like this. For her. She wore red. Of course she did. Every mistress thinks red makes her invincible. But the most dangerous women I've ever known, they wore silence like a diamond and heartbreak like armor. They didn't see us right away. They were too busy laughing. I watched his hand brush hers as he pulled out her chair. It was rehearsed the way they interacted, like two actors on a stage where no one else mattered. I turned back to Nathan. He was still talking, polite, engaged, but his words were starting to slow because he was noticing my eyes weren't on him anymore. Then it happened. My husband looked up. His eyes found me, and his entire face broke. In 1 second, he realized what I had known for weeks, that I had seen it all, that I was done pretending, that I wasn't going to scream. I was going to let the truth walk right into his lap. He almost dropped his glass. The waiter caught it. Sophie, yes, I knew her name now, followed his line of sight. Her smile faded, and I watched them both try to rearrange their expressions like shattered porcelain. I stood slowly excusing myself. Nathan watched me concerned. Everything okay? I nodded, just the restroom. What I didn't say was, I'm about to end the theater show. No more scene partners, no more spotlights, just raw, unedited reality. In the hallway, she found me first. Sophie, she was smaller up close. Not in size, but in presence. You're Claire, right? I didn't answer right away. She said it again, voice softer. Lucas's wife. I said flatly. She blinked, and I could see the world collapsing behind her mascara. Please, she whispered, not here. Why not? I tilted my head. Seems perfect. Candlelight violin secrets marinated in Sauvignon Blanc. Don't you think it's romantic? Her lips trembled. She looked around as if searching for an escape route. There's nothing going on anymore, she said quickly. Tell that to your husband, I replied calmly. Then I nodded toward Nathan, still seated, checking his phone politely. He should know what his wife is doing 10 feet away. Or rather, who. And then the moment I'd waited for, Lucas appeared. Claire, he said breathlessly, what are you? I didn't let him finish. Instead, I stepped back into the dining room, called out softly, firmly, Nathan, would you mind joining me for a moment? He stood, concern in his eyes, but he came. He stopped just beside me. I turned to him gently. Nathan, this is my husband, Lucas, and I believe you already know your wife. The entire restaurant paused. Or maybe it was just my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Sophie's face went pale. Lucas couldn't breathe. Nathan looked from her to me, then back to her. He didn't yell, didn't cry. He simply said, is it true? She couldn't answer. Her silence said everything. I turned, looked at them both one last time, and said, dinner's still on Lucas. After all, you already had the wine arranged. Don't let it go to waste. Then I walked away. Not because I was done, but because they were. The restaurant never fully recovered its rhythm. Forks stilled midair. Waiters froze between courses. The violinist missed a note. It was the kind of moment people would whisper about for weeks, not because there was shouting, but because the truth had been delivered with such calm, surgical precision. No drama, no chaos, just a mirror held up to a lie. I didn't leave immediately. No, I wasn't finished. I returned to my table where Nathan now stood, motionless, eyes still locked on the wreckage that used to be his marriage. He looked like a man who had just remembered every doubt he'd ever brushed aside. I picked up my wine glass untouched and took a small sip. Then I motioned to the waiter. Excuse me, I said, tone gentle but steady. Would it be possible to move us to a private room? I believe we all have some clarity to exchange. He blinked. Yes, ma'am, right away. Within 5 minutes, we were seated again, the four of us, in a quiet, softly lit space away from the public eye. Not to protect reputations, but to remove performance. No more pretending. I sat across from Lucas, Nathan beside me, Sophie across from him. A perfect symmetry of betrayal. No one spoke for a long time. Just the clink of glasses being refilled by a server who had no idea he was walking into a battlefield. Lucas was the first to break. Claire, I don't even know where to start. I looked at him, really looked. This wasn't the man who danced with me barefoot in our first apartment. This was someone else, someone I didn't recognize. Start, I said quietly 3 nights ago, when you received the confirmation for this dinner. His mouth opened, but I raised my hand. No excuses. I saw the message, the reservation, the seat request, the wine selection. I saw it all, Lucas. And then I opened your phone. Sophie flinched. I read everything. I continued. Every message, every picture, every little lie that you sugarcoated in emojis and late night texts. I read your hotel confirmations. I saw the photos from Santa Fe. I saw the way you held her like you forgot anyone else ever existed. He dropped his eyes. Sophie whispered, I'm sorry. But I turned to Nathan. He's my husband, I said softly. And she's your wife. At the very least, we both deserve to hear the truth, out loud. Nathan didn't blink, didn't even tremble. He just said, tell me why. Sophie looked at her lap, then at him, and finally at herself. I don't know, she murmured. I didn't plan it. It started with one joke in the break room. He made me laugh. And I was lonely. I felt invisible at home. Nathan exhaled slow and jagged. Invisible. I redesigned our home office for you because you said you couldn't focus. I picked up your mother from her doctor's appointments every Friday for months. I packed your lunch for 10 years. He paused. You weren't invisible. You were seen. You were just bored. Sophie broke. Her tears came and she covered her face. Lucas leaned forward, eyes on me now. Claire, I know I hurt you. I was selfish. I thought it was harmless at first, something I could control. But it spiraled. I lost my mind. You lost your character, I interrupted. He froze. I continued, voice even. You didn't just cheat, Lucas. You rehearsed. You booked tables. You coordinated outfits. You called me on your way to see her pretending you were in meetings. You came home and kissed me with someone else's lipstick still on your collar. His lips parted. I saw a tremble. I thought, I said, staring through him, that I could forgive anything. But what I've realized is forgiveness without respect is just self-destruction. Nathan looked at me, and for the first time all evening, I saw his pain shift into something else resolve. Lucas reached for my hand. I can fix this. I pulled away. You can't fix what you kept breaking on purpose. Sophie sobbed louder now. Nathan stayed stone still. Then slowly I opened my clutch, pulled out a silver hotel keycard, placed it on the table. I'm staying at the Celeste across the street. I'll be back Monday morning to gather the rest of my things. I suggest you're not home when I return. Lucas blinked. Claire, please, no. And then I turned to Nathan. I'm sorry you had to find out like this. He nodded. No, thank you. I'd rather be hurt by the truth than comforted by a lie. Then he stood, not angry, not broken, just done. I followed. As we left the room, I looked back one final time at the wreckage of a fantasy. Two people who thought they could keep what they had and still steal something more. But you don't get to build love on ruins, and you don't get to keep someone just because they've stayed before. That night, I sat alone in a hotel suite facing the city skyline. The lights of downtown glittered like a reminder that life kept moving, even when yours had been split wide open. I didn't cry at first. I just sat, shoes off, clutch on the floor, everything still. Then the tears came. Not soft, not graceful. Ugly, honest, human. I cried for every time I made excuses for his absences. For every time I told myself his distance was just stress, for the 17 years I cooked meals while he texted her from the bathroom, I cried until I couldn't anymore. And just as I reached the quiet after the storm, a knock. I opened the door slowly. It was Nathan, still in his coat, still carrying the weight of what had just happened. I didn't know where else to go, he said, eyes tired. I stepped aside, then come in. We didn't say much, didn't need to. We just sat in two chairs by the window watching a city that hadn't paused for either of us. I still don't understand how you sat through dinner like that, he whispered. I gave a small smile. I didn't sit still. I waited. He nodded. I should have seen it sooner. We both should have, I replied. But love makes you believe the best, even when the evidence is right in front of you. We sat there until the hour turned over, until the night softened around us. When he stood to leave, I walked him to the door. If you need someone to talk to, he said, I'm here. Not because of what happened, but because you didn't let it destroy you. I smiled. I almost did, but I chose something else instead. What? Me. The days that followed weren't loud. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic apologies sent with flowers or strings of voicemails. The damage was done not just to a marriage, but to an identity. I didn't return to the house that weekend. I didn't need to. I had already packed up the version of myself that once lived there. Monday morning, while the city stirred beneath gray clouds, I went back, not for reconciliation, but for closure. Lucas was there. Of course he was. Still clinging to the past like it hadn't shattered. Still hoping that love could be negotiated like contracts. Claire, he said as I walked through the door. He stood like a boy about to be scolded. Not a man who had betrayed his vows. I didn't sit. I'm just here for my things. He nodded. But the desperation in his eyes screamed louder than his silence. I told Sophie it's over. I cut her off completely. She left town. She didn't leave, I corrected. She ran. He swallowed hard. I told the firm everything. I stepped down from the partnership. I've been seeing a therapist. I'm doing the work. I placed my keys on the counter. You're doing the work because you lost something, not because you regret what you did. There's a difference. He stepped forward. Please don't leave like this. I looked at him, then really looked. The bags under his eyes, the unshaven jaw, the slumped shoulders of a man finally feeling the weight of every careless choice. You didn't think of me when you made the reservation, I said quietly. Don't think of me now that it's been exposed. His mouth opened, closed again. I turned away. As I walked into what was once our bedroom, I realized something strange. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel longing. I didn't even feel hurt in the same way. I felt finished. I gathered what I needed, not just clothes, not just books, but anything that belonged to me. The version of me that had always been buried under compromise. And when I walked out of that house, it was without a backward glance. The next weeks were quiet, unfamiliar at first, like learning a new language spoken only in solitude. But then something shifted. There was a knock on my new apartment door. Nathan, holding two coffees. I didn't know if you were still a hazelnut person, he said, sheepish. I am. He smiled, then I guessed right. We sat on my small balcony watching the neighborhood come alive with Saturday noises. Kids riding bikes, distant dogs barking the hum of a world continuing. No mention of Sophie, no mention of Lucas. Just two people who had once stood at the epicenter of their own earthquakes, now sipping quietly on the outskirts of peace. We talked, sometimes deeply, sometimes not at all. He told me about his design projects, how he'd been working on a sustainable housing prototype, how his firm nearly dropped him when the news leaked, but he didn't care. They said I lost my edge, he chuckled. Truth is, I lost the part of me that pretended everything was fine. I understood that better than anyone. I told him about my students, how I returned to teaching but kept a seat empty in the front row of every class. What for, he asked. For the version of me that used to teach on autopilot. I keep it empty so she knows she's not welcome back. He nodded like he'd done the same in his own way. We didn't rush into anything. Not dates, not titles, not promises. Just consistency. He showed up, not to fix me, but to walk beside me while I rebuilt myself. He came to my lectures when he could. Sometimes speaking as a guest, other times just sitting in the back row, the same man whose wife had betrayed him now, talking to young minds about resilience in architecture. One day after class, as students gathered around him with notebooks and questions, I watched his hands move, explaining structure, vision, integrity. And I realized we weren't broken anymore. We were repurposed. Months passed. Spring arrived early that year. It crept into the corners of my apartment, soft morning light stretching across wooden floors, fresh air carrying the scent of new things. I picked up photography again. Not professionally, just enough to see the world differently. Nathan and I went to the botanical gardens one weekend. He brought a sketch pad. I brought a lens. We said little, but everything in us was speaking. At some point, I looked up from my camera and caught him watching me. What I asked. Nothing he said, just, I haven't seen someone look at the world like that in a long time. I lowered the lens. You mean without bitterness? I mean with presence. One night, as we walked along the river after an outdoor jazz concert, he paused. The breeze was cool, the sky dimming. Claire, he said, I'm not rushing you. I don't want to push you into anything you're not ready for, but if ever you want to try again, not love as we knew it, not marriage or roles, but just something true, something honest, I'm here. I turned to face him. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel fear in that question. I felt stillness. I don't want to love the old way either, I said. But if it means starting as we are, no masks, no performances, then maybe we already started. He didn't move toward me, didn't lean in. He just held my hand. No promises, no declarations, just quiet truth between two people who had once fallen apart and were now not starting over, but starting real. A year after the storm, the sky was clear again, not just outside, but within me. There was no dramatic final act, no revenge montage, no karmic explosion of consequence, just time and healing and the slow, deliberate return to myself. That summer, I received an invitation, a retirement celebration for Professor Elaine Barrett, my former mentor, and the woman who had once written in the margin of my dissertation, Clarity is more powerful than force. It would be held at the Leora Hotel, quiet, elegant, timeless. I didn't hesitate to RSVP. I arrived early, wearing navy, no longer needing red to feel strong. My hair was pulled back, my mother's pearls in my ears, a small wrapped gift in hand, a first edition copy of Barrett's favorite out of print business philosophy book. She'd once said it saved her career. I hoped it would mark the next chapter of mine. I wasn't expecting anything but warm conversation, a few familiar faces, and perhaps a quiet toast. But fate isn't always done speaking, even when you've stopped listening. Because across the room near the wine table stood a man I hadn't seen in over a year. Lucas. Thinner, gray at the temples, still polished but no longer performing. When he saw me, he froze. It wasn't awkward, it wasn't cinematic. It was still. He walked over slowly, wineglass in hand. Claire, he said, voice rough, I didn't think I'd see you here. I could say the same, I replied, neutral. He smiled faintly. Professor Barrett is one of the few people who still talks to me after everything. She always believed in second chances. A pause. I owe you an apology, he said, eyes lowering. Not for closure, not because you need it, but because I need to say it. I nodded. He continued. After everything fell apart, I thought I could fix it. Fix my image, my career, even Sophie. But the truth is, I broke more than I realized. I broke myself. She left a few weeks after you did. Said she couldn't handle being with a man who couldn't stop looking backward. I studied his face. There was no deflection, no excuse. Just reality, late but honest. I hope you find peace, I said softly. And you, he asked, are you okay? Yes, I answered with no hesitation. I'm not just okay, I'm whole, on my own terms. And just then Nathan entered the room. He wore a charcoal shirt, no tie, understated. He spotted me and smiled, a real one, the kind that begins in the heart and spreads slowly. Lucas followed my gaze. He didn't react with jealousy, he just nodded. He's a good man, he said. He is. You deserve that, Lucas murmured. A fresh start. One that doesn't come with apology bouquets and promises made too late. I nodded, placing a hand over my chest. Thank you, and you too. Just start when you're ready, not to hurt anyone else. He stepped back as if clearing a path, and I walked forward toward the man who never rushed me, never tried to fill silence with noise, never made me feel like I was a backup plan. Nathan and I sat together through the speeches, the laughter, the photos. We danced once slow and simple under the string lights that hung like stars. Not a romance for the movies, but something better. Something real. No vows, no labels, just two people who met at the edge of disaster and built something honest in its wake. Later that night, as we walked along the sidewalk outside, I glanced at the sky. You know, I said there was a time when I believed betrayal was the end. Nathan's hand gently squeezed mine. And now I believe it was the break I needed to turn towards the right path. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. Because in that moment, beneath the stars, with the past behind us and no script ahead, we both knew this wasn't about finding a happy ending. It was about beginning again with eyes open, with walls down, with nothing to prove and everything to feel.